I won't. But I'd like to come back to what is so immensely pressing on so many people's minds all over the world right now, the pandemic, of course. And we recall from 2 days ago, young Rinpoche said, if you look outwards, you are bound to reify what you're seeing out there. Therefore, look inwards into the mirror of the mind. And so as I follow the news, you know, and it's very easy to reify that awful thing out there, that creepy, crawly, invisible, demonic spirit called the coronavirus that's out to get us. And as we watch at the very measures coming up of economic measures, of quarantine, of lockdown, of working for the medicine that can protect us from it. And as we look outwards, single-pointedly focusing outwards, because that's what the media would have us do. Modernity would have us do, look outwards. It seems that our well-being, our happiness, our future, all hinges on what happens out there. How fast will it subside? Who just said, oh, it's getting maybe a bit calmer in Europe. Oh, and then we feel this sense of relief. The vaccine may be around the corner. But maybe it won't. And maybe that's a blip. Maybe there'll be a second wave. Maybe this will come every year. Maybe. And so insofar as we're looking outwards and having the sense that my well-being hinges on what happens outwards, and what happens outwards is almost entirely beyond my control. If one doesn't have some kind of dharma, an authentic path to genuine well-being rooted in reality, the deepest reality, then I see no alternative but anxiety and depression. So now, in such times as this, the value of having a spiritual path becomes more evident than perhaps any other time in recent history, in remembered history. That our well-being doesn't hinge, you and I and each of us, wherever we are, our well-being doesn't hinge on the growth of the virus or the suppression of the virus, finding the vaccine or not finding the vaccine, the economy going up, the economy going down. I see this wild bipolar, wild oscillation between hope and fear, hope and fear, hope and fear. And boy, if that's all we've got, then this really is samsara. So for a long time now, I won't elaborate, but for a long time we've been, in a manner of speaking, we modernity, we modern civilization, we've been breathing out into the world, looking for all the happiness out there, looking what are the problems out there, everything out there. We've been breathing out, always looking outwards with hope and with fear. And it's, if we continue exhaling and exhaling, after a while, we're just suffocating. We're expiring, we're getting exhausted. And we're sowing seeds. We have, especially for the last 150 years, with the rise of materialism, hedonism, consumerism, we are exhausting our world. We're depleting our world. And the rise of this virus is not just out of the blue. It's not just an accident. Oh, how come that happened? In the Buddhist worldview, the question never comes up, how could Buddha allow this? Buddha didn't allow it. He didn't create it. We created it. We created the conditions for this to arise. It was human beings did it. His Holiness Dalai Lama was asked once about the utterly tragic situation in Syria, which we all know about so well, with I think now more than 5 million refugees. And he was asked, shall we pray that this problem, this crisis, the misery there will go away? Shall we pray to God, pray to Buddha? And the Dalai Lama's response was, God didn't create that problem. Buddha didn't create that problem. We created the problem. So why should we ask him to solve a problem that we created? So this is not to deny the efficacy, the value of prayer. But this virus and all the circumstances about it, these come about from a Buddhist perspective in a completely naturalistic way. We don't need to look to supernatural agency that causes or allows or could have prevented this virus, but what it is doing, what it can do, not objectively, but in this participation with reality. If we rise to meet this crisis, the medical, the financial, and so forth, if we rise to meet this situation, drawing from the wisdom of our respective spiritual traditions, through this participatory involvement with this phenomenal reality that we meet with today, We can transform this. It's not that it was given to us as a test or a gift, or this is something that Buddha really wanted us to have. It's arising because of natural causes, but if we bring our Dharma to it, we can see after 150 years of exhaling and exploiting and going out, finally, this virus is saying, if you would like to just survive, let alone flourish, you might want to start inhaling. You might want to start withdrawing into solitude, into the quietude of your own chambers. You might want to keep really clean. Wash your hands. Go for purity, outer and inner purity, and withdraw into solitude. And then you say, wow, I'm the master of my universe. I'm saying this tongue in cheek. But here I am in this lovely library, in this Carmelite hermitage out in the wilds of Colorado. I'm the master of my destiny here. If I withdraw, how's the virus going to get to me? If I keep my hands clean when I set out, how exactly is that boogeyman going to get to me? I have a lot of control. I don't need to get that virus if I take this opportunity. And in Buddhism, we speak of the inexpressible preciousness of having leisure and opportunity to focus oneself single-pointedly on one's spiritual practice. And right now, enforced by all of these restrictions, the lockdown, we just had a lockdown in the state of Colorado where we are right now, Eva and I. In this, we have now the leisure because there's really nothing to do out there for the time being. And we have the opportunity because we are very well acquainted with, we've already been enriched by our spiritual traditions. And this, such a situation of leisure and opportunity is said to be more valuable than a wish-fulfilling jewel that can provide you with all your hedonic desires and wishes. So I'm seeing this as a tremendous opportunity, and individually in the quietude of our own chambers, to turn within and recognize my well-being does not hinge on the ups and downs of the economy, the spread or not spread of the virus, the rapidity which they do or do not find a vaccine. In other words, I'm not a betting man. I'm not going into the casino of samsara and betting my life that I'm sure they're going to be able to contain it. I'm sure they're going to get a vaccine, and then I can be happy. I win. The Tibetan term for pride is ngagel. Pride as I'm superior, I'm better than others. But literally the term means I win. Ngagel. Well, I don't want to win. I would like to surrender and savor the beauty of the silence, the simplicity, the solitude. And to cut to just a second point, because I won't go on for 45 minutes. When you spoke of St. Thomas, speaking of the incomprehensibility of God, that he can never be captured with word or thought. This theme comes up absolutely prominently, I think it's really through all of Buddhism. Nirvana in the Theravada, and Buddha nature in the Mahayana, pristine awareness in the great perfection of Dzogchen. Within the Mahayana, the great 8th century Indian Buddhist Bodhisattva or saint Shantideva, tremendously renowned in all of Tibetan Buddhism, said very succinctly, the ultimate is not within the scope of the intellect. The intellect will never be able to own it, capture it, have it, possess it. It transcends the intellect. In Dzogchen, the great perfection, everything is really about identifying one's own face, one's own nature, as pristine awareness, primordial consciousness, but they're quick to add, by its very nature, the Dharmakaya, primordial consciousness, pristine awareness, utterly transcend all verbal articulation and all conceptualization, all conceptual categories. As Eva was saying, beyond the very categories of does pristine awareness exist or not? If you're asking the question, you didn't get it at all, because it's beyond the very parameters of existence and non-existence, arising and passing, coming and going. It's beyond the very parameters of one and more than one. If as a Buddhist, I say, well, what about the pristine awareness of Father Laurence? When you plumb the depths of your being, you will identify your own nature and it will be pristine awareness. If I plumb the depths of my being, I will identify pristine awareness. What's the relationship between your pristine awareness and the ground of your being and the pristine awareness that is the ground of my being? What's the relationship? Are they one? Are they the same? Or are they different? You have yours and everybody has their own. And once again, wrong question. It's wrong question. Pristine awareness is beyond any categorization, including enumeration. It's not one as one more than zero or one less than two. So then this raises the question. Pristine awareness, Dharmakaya, the great perfection itself, the view of reality from the perspective of pristine awareness, where we look upon the whole of samsara and nirvana and say, it is good. It is pristinely pure. If this is ineffable and inconceivable, why are there so many books about Dzogchen? Why are there so many talks about Dzogchen? Why are there so many parables and analogies about Dzogchen or pristine awareness? And this brings us to a fundamental difference in the use of language, and I think that's well stopped. And that is, if we take Bonvo, your lovely environment there, it's actually not inconceivable as far as I know, but if we just take that as a place, there are two ways to use language to get people to Bonvo or an understanding of Bonvo. And one would be the descriptive use of language. And so you now so familiar with your environment, you could tell us, what's it like? What's the foliage? What's the architecture? What's the temperature, the climate? What's the soil? What's it like there? What's the population? You could describe, you could write at least a long article on Bonvo, and I could read that, and it wouldn't be the same as being there, but I say, now I know why Father Laurence chose that place rather than someplace else, and I can imagine it. Thank you. That was a very helpful descriptive use of language, and I've kind of got it. At least I have some clear impression that is not incorrect. That's one use. On the other hand, you could tell me, Alan, where are you? Oh, you're in Colorado? Okay, here's how you get to Bonvo. Make your way to Denver. From Denver, fly to Paris. From Paris, take the train to Poitiers. In Poitiers, get a taxi or send a car, and then that will bring you to Bonvo. But Bonvo is inconceivable, ineffable. You cannot imagine Bonvo, but I just told you how to get there. And that's called the instrumental use of language. So all the parables, the analogies, all the wise tomes of great theologians, great contemplatives, great philosophers are all pointing the finger to pristine awareness. None of their words ever capture it, but as giving a guidebook or directions, how do you get to Bonvo? How do you come home and identify your own nature? And it is only your pristine awareness that can know pristine awareness. Your intellect cannot, the substrate consciousness that I mentioned, cannot fathom it above its pay grade. But when you break through, again, the Durchbruch, break through your human psyche, break through substrate consciousness, and you're actually viewing reality from, it said your own pristine awareness, but not your own as opposed to somebody else's. It's just that it isn't anybody else's. You're not tapping into somebody else's pristine awareness, like Buddha's or God or some other great bodhisattva. It's none other than you. You're viewing reality from there, and you're seeing your own face. You have finally come to know who you are. And when you open your awareness to the world around you from that perspective, you see all appearances or expressions, creative expressions, effulgences, displays of your own pristine awareness. And then we ask, of your own, what's the referent of you? Not Alan Wallece, not Alan Wallace's pristine awareness. You as in, be still and know that I am God. Be still, quiet your human mind, quiet the conceptual mind. Release all the identification with the finite. And what remains is pristine awareness, knowing itself and seeing directly all appearances as its own creations, its own self-expressions. Different notion of creator, but that is the notion in Dzogchen. And I find it the closest that I've ever seen to the most profound mystical writings. For example, in that whole current from the 8th century to the 15th, from John Scotius Eriugena to Nicholas of Cusa. As I was reading through that, as I was writing my book, Mind in the Balance, I thought, my goodness, this is a very different tradition with very different origins. The book of Genesis is very different than the Four Noble Truths. But look how they converge. Look how they converge. And this is the meaning of life as I understand it. Know reality as it is, and by so doing, identify experientially what is the root of all virtue and all genuine well-being. And we can pursue that independent of the rising and passing of viruses and wars and economic collapses and so forth. Is always there if we have enable ourselves, allow ourselves to have the leisure and opportunity to get real and know reality as it is before we die.